But then you get stories like this. This is from the Novus Ordo Watch, and they have an image of a Muslim praying in the Great Hall of the Vatican Museum. And Legionnaire of Christ Matthew Schneider, who is very active on social media, explains that there's no dedicated Muslim prayer room or sign, and that the image that you see on Novus Ordo Watch's website, it's fabricated. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to actually talk about a lot of things happening in the Vatican, from things that the Pope has never done in over 50 years. Then we're also going to look at what the Holy Father is trying to do, or the Vatican is trying to do, by welcoming Muslims to pray in the Vatican. We're going to clarify that. And then finally, we're going to review just very briefly the Dilexite Encyclical of Pope Leo XIV, which was really the continuation of Pope Francis's pontificate. But we're going to jump right all into it. But before we do, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment so as to help us overcome the algorithms on the internet that want to suppress good Catholic balanced pastoral content. And also, please consider supporting us on patreon.com/The Father Leo Show. It's the only way that we can continue to do this work and provide this content for you to help you, listen, become a better Catholic, and to avoid all the craziness that people are saying about our Catholic faith, and particularly now, Pope Leo XIV. So let's just jump right into it with my commentaries. A few episodes ago, I put out an episode regarding Pope Leo XIV and how I was just grateful that he was seen as a boring pope. But in these past few weeks, there has been a lot of information that's coming out regarding Pope Leo XIV and how technically he's now embroiled in a lot of controversial comments, particularly about the United States and the immigration. And we're going to jump into it, especially when we talk about Dilexite. But he was also in the news for things that a lot of people didn't see but saw hope. And there's always like a desire to pin this new pope as either a woke pope or just his own pope. He's got to kind of grow into his own papacy. And for the first few months, it was rather quiet. But then came things like this environmental justice conference where he blessed a block of ice that was over 200,000 years old, I believe, or something like that. It was a very old block of ice, and a lot of people found that to be kind of strange. And I was actually quoted on Church Pop for EWTN by talking about how ice and snow bless the Lord, and it's from the Canticle of Daniel in the Old Testament, where we see how everything that's created by God is to be a blessing to the earth and also to offer a blessing to God. But just recently, he actually attended a swearing-in ceremony for the Swiss Guards in over 57 years, I believe. So check this out, because it's pretty cool, the fact that the Pope has his own guards and are willing to give their life to him.
Since 1968, no pope has presided over the oath of the Swiss Guards. The last was Pope Paul VI. It makes sense for a pontiff to be present, however. After all, these new recruits swear, in this case, to defend Pope Leo XIV, even to the point of giving up their lives if necessary. This is how the ceremony began. There are 27 new soldiers who joined the 135 members of the Pope's personal guard. Although it may seem like they're only stationed at the entrances of the Vatican, their work goes far beyond that. For example, even when not wearing these striking uniforms, they provide the Pope's protection at all apostolic trips, both inside and outside Italy. This is what the commander of the Swiss Guards expressed to the Pope minutes before the oath.
Santo Padre, con questo giuramento ogni singola guardia si impegna a servire con tutte le sue forze. Lei è, se le circostanze lo richiederanno, persino al sacrificare la propria vita.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pretty dramatic ceremony where the head of the Swiss Guards talks about how these men are willing to devote their life to the protection of the Holy Father for a period of 3 years, I believe. And they have to even live a celibate and chaste life. They are there not just as military people, but as men being consecrated for their work. And they grab a flag of their Swiss Guards and they just scream. They hold like a three or something like that, and they scream out that this is in the name of the most holy Trinity and that they're going to give their life to the Pope. And I've met several Swiss Guards. In fact, I'm going to be going on a pilgrimage in 2026 where we're actually going to go to northern Italy and into Switzerland. And I'm working now with a former Swiss Guard who is Switzerland's basically top chef, who's a friend of mine. We've worked together. His name is Chef David Geiser. Anyway, he is pretty impressive because we did an episode together on EWTN as a chef, and off camera we were talking about whether the Swiss Guards really knew what they were doing. And I was a former martial arts instructor, and so I can kind of hold my own. But I mean, this is a few years after, being in the priesthood. But so we do kind of like a hand-to-hand thing, and he slams me on the floor, and I am almost ready to writhe in pain because this guy was serious. And it's just a beautiful thing to know that the Holy Father actually attended this ceremony, and again, over 50 years. So a lot of people will look at that and say, that's a good sign. He's doing something that is traditional. But then you get stories like this. This is from the Novus Ordo Watch, and they have an image of a Muslim praying in the Great Hall of the Vatican Museum, which is a long, very long hallway that will eventually lead to the Sistine Chapel. But in this hallway, you have these side antechambers or these side rooms where you have access to see some incredible works of art, some tapestries, the ancient cartography room where you see these old maps and how people thought the world looked like prior to seeing an overview. But there's also an area where this is saying hot off the press, and this is coming off of October the 8th, 2025 by the Novus Ordo Watch. They say, from popular "you can't make this stuff up" department, the Vatican Apostolic Library in the Vatican City is happy, at least upon request, to provide Muslim visitors with a prayer room so as to accommodate their practice of a false religion. And then it talks about in an interview with Reverend Giacomo Cardinale, who was made a cardinal in 1977, which was published today in the progressive Italian daily Repubblica newspaper. Followers of the false prophet Muhammad are assured that their objectively false worship is welcome in the sacred halls of Vatican Library, albeit in a separate room. The German Novus Ordo news site, which is Katholikisch, just of the Catholics, has released a report on the paywalled interview in an English translation. Here's the English translation. Even in the most important library in Christendom, Muslims do not have to give up their prayers. Quote, "Of course, some Muslim scholars have asked us for a room with a carpet for praying and we have given it to them," unquote, said Cardinal Giacomo, the vice prefect of the Apostolic Vatican Library, to the newspaper La Repubblica. The Vatican's book collection contains incredibly old Qurans, Cardinal continued. "We are a universal library. There are Arabic, Jewish, Ethiopian collections, and unique Chinese items." And so people are up in arms about that, and I'm here to tell you that's not necessarily fake news, but it is news that requires perspective. And Legionnaire of Christ Matthew Schneider, who is very active on social media, explains that there's no dedicated Muslim prayer room or sign, and that the image that you see on Novus Ordo Watch's website, it's fabricated, of course. But what I want to do is just kind of remind people that the Vatican is made up of St. Peter's Basilica, the Apostolic Palace, the Apostolic Gardens, some dicastery operational offices, as well as things like a general store, a post office. I mean, while it's very small, it operates as its own city, and the Vatican Library is part of the Vatican. And while there are many works of Christian art, there's also some pre-Christian art there. There's some scientific rooms where they talk about the space, and also, as you heard from the cardinal prefect, there are works of arts and old Qurans. And so when, say, like a Muslim scholar will go to the Vatican, and they will be given access to it because it is part of their religion. We're not going to deny that. It's a property of the Vatican, but they can go and they can review it and do research. Well, guess what? They might have to pray because they pray 5 times a day on a prayer rug. And out of hospitality, we provide it for them. That's not a big deal because it's not happening in the Vatican. Everyone, Father Leo here. You know that I travel by the different backgrounds that I sometimes have whenever I record these shows. And I want to just invite you to some of the travels that I have scheduled in 2026. We've got some great trips available, and all you got to do is go to platinggrace.com/travel. Gives you a chance to get to know other faithful foodies who want to explore their Catholic faith in a deeper but also festive way. So make sure you visit platinggrace.com/travel or call Select International Tours at 800-842-4842 and sign up for one of my upcoming pilgrimages. But I think that what we're finding is that people are being led to believe that everyone who goes to the Vatican is praying to Jesus Christ, and that's not true. There are a lot of non-Catholics, non-Christians, non-believers, and even pantheist religions go to the Vatican, and yeah, we expect them to respect the holiness and the sacred nature, but we can't force anyone to believe anything. For them, it's a museum. For us, it's one of the most sacred places in Christendom. And that's something that we can expect that they respect. But the Vatican Library is a separate thing. And this room in which they can study the Quran for, scholarly purposes, they have an area. The Vatican provided them a rug. They can pray on it in the same way. Wait, that would actually never happen in a Muslim mosque. I can tell you that much because, for example, in the mosque in Turkey that was at one point a Catholic Byzantine basilica is now a Muslim temple. You will not be able to practice Christian prayers there. That would not happen. But this shows not the weakening of the Vatican, but what we've always been. We've always been a home for all people. And we have to provide this hospitality, not because we want to appear woke, because this was something that happened even before Pope Leo. But you see, what's happening is that there are some perhaps extreme conservative groups that want to point out that Pope Leo is woke. And that's just, it's trying to put him in a political light. And recently, he was asked about Dick Durbin. He made a comment. That went kind of crazy viral. And then he was asked by another reporter about President Trump trying to send National Guards to the state of Illinois, his home state. And Pope Leo says clearly, I'm not talking about things of that nature. He just refuses to talk about it. I'm glad that he's not trying to weigh in on it because what he has to say is incredibly important. He did welcome recently some bishops from El Paso and spoke about how the Catholic Church and the Catholic bishops constantly need to be a voice of compassion and empathy and support for the dignity of all migrants. He does not make distinctions between legal versus illegal. And that might be what challenges people, because in the new encyclical that is coming out, which is something that Pope Francis started before he died is something that Pope Leo continued and kind of completed. And so from Vatican News, this is something that we can't forget. And it's really, there's some beautiful moments in this encyclical. So as far as a summary goes, Pope Leo XIV's first apostolic exhortation sees how the love of Christ incarnated in love for the poor, in caring for the sick, opposing slavery, defending women who experience exclusion and violence, making education available to all, accompanying migrants, charitable giving, working for equality, and more. It really is quite Pope Leo XIV style to continue the social teaching of Pope Leo XIII from his encyclical Rerum Novarum that touched on some of these issues of justice and particularly the Catholic social teaching. And so there will be a lot of people who are going to say that Dilexite, which means I have loved you, from Revelations 3, chapter 3, verses 9, unfolds in about 121 paragraphs, spread throughout 5 chapters, and flows from the gospel of the Son of God, who in the very act of entering into our world through the incarnation became poor for our sake. And this is the key word, is incarnation. You see, our Jewish brothers and sisters are still waiting for the quote-unquote revelation of the Messiah, the incarnation of God. They don't believe that it's Jesus. Our Muslims, brothers and sisters, they do not want God to become human. They do not accept the incarnation of God. So Christianity stands very unique among the monotheistic religions, even though people think that we believe 3 gods. We know that the Trinitarian formula is the belief in 1 God, but we believe that God became man and dwelt among us. And he has not necessarily a preferential option for the poor in a political way, but in a compassionate way, because remember, God wants to lift up the lowly. So he goes to a poor virgin born in a poor city, in a poor state, and he died a poor man on Calvary. Yet, he was filled with riches, and he wants to share those riches. And this is not, again, a commentary on say, reparations. Nothing of that sort is that nature is mentioned in here. But the one thing that people are kind of up in arms about is truly the immigration issue. And I have to admit that this does not have the nuance of even Pope Francis's approach, who basically wanted to tell countries that, yeah, you have the responsibility to make your own decisions and laws as who you're going to bring in or not. But in this case, it just seems that migrants is such an open-ended topic. And it is not law, it's not dogma, it's not a constitutional document. It is an exhortation. It's an exhortation. And again, while the Catholic Church does have language that talk about validity versus illicity when it comes to the sacraments, the presence of Christ, I don't see a lot of the bishops talking about just the differences between legal versus illegal. And it's worth a conversation. I'm not putting any blame on anyone, because ultimately the Pope is 100% correct. We need to accompany people. We need to love them. We need to care for them. Yes, we can say all we want, but also follow the laws of the land, which means don't try to break immigration laws. But we also know that there are some people fleeing their countries, asylum seekers, and we also know that, sadly, while we can talk about a professional group of people who are law enforcers, there are bad apples in every group, and they make it bad for the optics of immigration enforcement. But this does not mean that the Pope is woke. So I just kind of want to offer these Vatican happenings right now, because a lot is going on, and you can kind of become, I don't know, overwhelmed with an opinion based on the information you are receiving. And as someone who studied and lived in Vatican City states, extraterritorial Vatican City state, with great classmates, we can all say that this is not out of the ordinary. We have to know that our Catholic faith is not just the spiritual works of mercy, but the corporal works of mercy as well. And that's what Dilexite is trying to encourage us to do. As God has loved us, incarnated examples by Jesus Christ, we are to do as well. I hope that this helps with your discernment of what you're hearing and seeing about the Vatican. I hope to do more of this, and that's why we definitely need your support. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment, and please consider supporting us on patreon.com/The Father Leo Show so that we can continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary. God bless you, and stay hungry for God.